And good day, everybody, and welcome to another in a series of our TextHelp live sessions and recordings. Recordings brought to you by the team at TextHelp, where during this time of lockdown and the worldwide situation that we have, we're here to listen to and talk to practitioners from around the globe that can help explain how TextHelp tools have supported their school previous to the current situation and indeed through it. Today's TextHelp Live is brought to you in conjunction with BSME, British Schools in the Middle East, and we're pleased to be sharing that through the BSME platform. And I'm joined today by a number of guests. First and foremost, I'm going to welcome Jamie Ball, who is Head of Middle East and Africa for us at TextHelp. Hi, Jamie, how are you today?
I'm not bad, thanks, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
And more importantly than anybody else, we're joined by Louise Dawson. And Louise is Head of Inclusion at Jumeirah College in Dubai. That's a very grand title, Louise, but we're really pleased to have you, and we're really, really keen to hear what you're going to say today. Louise, tell me, just to kick off today, tell me a little bit about your role and maybe a little bit more about Jumeirah College. How long have you been there? What sort of size of college is it?
Well, I've been in Dubai for 8 years. Jumeirah College, I've been there since September 2019. Jumeirah College is in Dubai and it's part of the GEMS education group. The school has 1,000 students of secondary and sixth form. Like I say, I joined in 2019, but I've been in Dubai for 8 years and I've used TextHelp across that time, across the schools. So we've brought it into Jumeirah College and we're in the process now of rolling it out.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of the tool itself, so with Read&Write, why were you looking at Read&Write as a tool for sort of your current college school and any previous roles you've had? What was important about sourcing a tool like Read&Write, Louise?
So within my practice, I'm very, very keen on the children becoming independent. And I think you'll find that as a stream throughout this conversation, is that independence is at the forefront of the mind. We need to prepare children for lifelong working. And so a software like TextHelp enables children to develop the skills for themselves, develop at their own rate, and provide the support to them to be as independent as possible.
And are there particular areas of need for pupils of determination that you found Read&Write can be particularly helpful with?
Okay, so within the school that I'm at now, I've got over 50 children that are identified with a barrier to learning. Those barriers are across physical, social, emotional, medical, communication, interaction, but what we tend to find is the majority of barriers to learning do present themselves in a literacy way, barriers to the literacy. So a piece of software like TextHelp allows us to support all of the children across all of the barriers that we find in school. We have at Jumeirah College, we do have students across the whole range of, I think I could probably tick every box on there.
So yeah, I hate putting up this slide sometimes, Louise, because it looks like a little tick box exercise and we never mean it to be like that. But I think it's important to stress when you look at a bit of software and you look at so many buttons and so many features within that software tool that can actually use the very same features to address such a wide set of pupils with determination. Is there, thinking about the toolbar, throughout your use of the toolbar in your career and experience with it, is there a particular feature around it? I mean, it's known very well for things like text to speech and of course speech to text within there as well. But is there a particular feature that has been beneficial particularly?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this earlier, I thought through all of the different aspects of the toolbar, and I think that the screen masking has been very useful for visual stress, visual impairment, and those kinds of barriers, especially in this time when we're in lockdown, when we're actually sat at our screens a great deal more. The picture dictionary has been very useful. And I found that this is useful not just to the students, but to the teachers as well, to prepare word banks, to prepare documents which have increased access to the text, especially when we're using GCSE and the language might be very difficult. Picture dictionary on that. And then when the children are actually typing work for themselves, the prediction and the verb checker and the sound like have to be the ones that I see the students using the most outside of assessment.
Okay, so that's a fairly wide range. I mean, one of the things that we talk about with Read and Write a lot, and Jamie who's joining us is a big proponent of it, is that phrase necessary for some and useful for all. And what's nice about what you've just said there is that there are key features that can be used very specifically to help that checklist that we looked at earlier, but can also be used by the widest range of students as well. So it's good to hear that. And have you a particular pupil story in terms of your use of Read and Write that you found Read and Write has really helped that student in any particular way?
Yeah, so about 4 years ago, I worked with a student who had a visual barrier, but also had a physical barrier when it came to handwriting. So what we did was we taught the speech to text element so that they could speak it. And because they were speaking directly into the technology, we didn't have to have an adult available to support that. And they could also do that within the home and the homework and expanding on work when they were alone without support of learning assistance. So the speech to text on the device was very useful. And then once he had written his piece of text, he was able to use those facilities like verb checker and sounds like to improve his work. If he was attacking a piece of homework and he didn't have staff with him, he could use the picture dictionary to break down the text for the homework. It really increased his vocabulary. It upskilled his independence, which made his self-esteem a bit stronger. And then we know with Maslow that once they are participating and engaging and seeking reward, that has a knock-on effect, that then it increases output and increases the grades. So the independence that he gained was phenomenal. When he arrived at GCSE, he no longer needed a reader and he no longer needed a scribe. The computer was able to read back what he was writing, and he was able to be successful independently and probably at a higher level than he would have been had he had that dependence on an adult, which would have then inhibited going on to further education and then going out into the workplace.
Okay, brilliant. No, that's a really, really powerful story. And I think the benefit of having somebody like yourself on a session like this, Louise, is it's for us, it's always about hearing from a practitioner and from that very practical experience, because we all do what we do for a reason, which is to help the children in our care and that we work with in terms of education, and hear those stories are very powerful. If you move beyond, say, those individual stories, which are very powerful, I mean, we talk about Read and Write in terms of how it can develop oral fluency. We talk about reading levels. In fact, we've done lots of efficacy in and around that and long-term studies. Have you seen that with kind of a wider range of students than just those individual students or pupils of determination that we talked about slightly earlier?
So one of the things about ReadWrite is that it is deliverable to the whole school. You don't have to be a student of need in order to access it. So we've rolled it out, so it's on the server. So anybody within the school who's working on a school laptop or computer, PC, or that is installed automatically onto all school devices. Okay. And then the students who want to then use it within their homework, they can just say we want it, and we can get that installed onto their personal devices. We've got the license that covers school and personal devices, which is useful for when they're at home.
So on screen, I've just pulled up a few points of where we would consider and where we've seen evidence of Read and Write really helping. And one of them, of course, is a very general term there, Louise, which is accessibility. And the times that we're living in now, of course, schools around the globe, and of course, in your region in particular, have had to move to remote learning. As we look forward to September, perhaps that will be a little bit more of a blended learning where we have learning in and outside class. So how important is accessibility for that remote learning situation that we're currently in right now?
It's very important. The children are all working independently at home. They may or may not have access to another adult in the home. Other adults are working full-time as well, trying to hold down their own jobs. So the independence and the skills required for that are more probably vital than ever. we've seen some children completely fly with remote learning, and we've seen other children struggle. So being able to put in something at home that we can then use to support them, because we can online train. We have the Zooms and the Microsoft Teams and all the other ways of working with children directly. We're able to share screens, and so being able to share the screen and say, right, now point here and now point here, and that will give you the access to that piece of the read-write. They're able to then access it independently. So in some ways, it has helped access work for the children, but also we've had increased participation in supporting children with using the software, because we can't put our hands on the mouse now, and we can't put our hands on the keyboard. We can't take away control at all. They've got to learn to do it for themselves. So in some ways, the current circumstances have helped implement read-write.
And of course, you were talking earlier there about the sort of the plan of rollout of something like Read&Write, and we've always talked at length about the importance of that multi-platform. And I'm guessing now, whilst you may be using the Windows environment in school, you can't legislate for that outside. Students may be using Google, they may be using an iPad, and of course, Read&Write and that deployment method you talked about earlier can help support that, I guess. So it's easier to get to the students in this time of remote learning. Yeah.
And I think that Read&Write is accessible across multiple platforms, because we're not just using Zoom or Microsoft. We are using Google, we're using Padlet, we're using so many. I think we did a log last week of about 14 different platforms that we're teaching on. So across different, so we might not be teaching on that platform, but we're receiving information on that platform, and we're asking the children to use that. So the accessibility of Read&Write across the multiple platforms has been very, very useful.
And as we come out of lockdown, Louise, and it's inevitable that exams make their way back into school life, have you used Read&Write as an exam reader?
Yeah, we have. So I'm not currently using it in this school, just to make sure who's watching and says, so we're not currently using it in JC. There is a plan to use it. It was planned for this year, but this is my first year, so we haven't been able to put that in. So the plan will now revert back for next summer. We will be reading it as an exam reader. One of the things I have used it before. One of the things I really liked about it was that the children can use it in the English language and the English literature GCSEs, along with the screen masking, the read aloud, for the children to be able to follow the same process as their peers, to be able to sit in the exam hall with their peers, albeit with a microphone or be it with the speaker, headphones, whatever they need. Being able to follow the same process as their peers is actually quite enabling for children.
Great to hear. And do you think that the students feel maybe a bit more comfortable being able to sit in with their peers and instead of having a human reader sitting beside them?
Yeah, so if you have a human reader, you have to be in a room on your own, which is not following the same process as all the other children at all. And I think that can be quite, for some children, if they're struggling with anxiety or other conditions on top, then that would be appropriate. But if it's purely that they need to have it read back to them, there's no reason why they can't sit with their peers. So I think it's massive for their self-esteem and for their well-being that they are able to feel better about accessing their exams too. And I think for parents too, parents don't think that, sitting in a room on your own is a fair and equitable way of accessing an exam. So for them to be in the exam hall, to be with their peers, to go through the same processes and the same everything is really important to the children, and they won't grow up. I think isolating the child at any point in their academic career stays with them for life. Any kind of withdrawal, any kind of separation from the group. So anything that we can do to increase their participation and independence at the same time is vital. It's vital to their long-term view of themselves.
Yeah, definitely. So lots of schools here will be thinking about the KHDA requirements, Louise. And in your opinion, how do you think Read&Write can potentially help with that?
So over the past 3 years, KHDA have released the new Dubai Framework for Inclusive Practice. They've released the initial document, then they released an implementation guide, and more recently this year they've released the directives. Now I can directly link ReadWrite and softwares like ReadWrite into the KHDA directives. So the school have to have a standard school-based support program, and something like ReadWrite, because it's implemented necessarily for children with barriers but accessible by all, it becomes part of the standard school service and doesn't become an add-on just for special needs. So that gives you equity and equality across the school. We need to start, again, it's all about that independence and the participation for the children. So being able to withdraw LSAs, slowly, it's not going to happen overnight. It doesn't happen in one day. It doesn't happen within a month. But over their time from year 7 on, so I'm secondary practice, but over a few years, if you can withdraw the LSA and increase participation, that meets the directives. If you can increase the use of assistive technology, that is directly linked to the directives as well. It is considered a curriculum modification and adaptation, directly linking down to the directives. Increasing independence, allowing specific intervention, it all links very nicely back to the whole of the directives and inclusive framework, which is participation and independence.
Yeah, very good, very good. And you did touch on this a little bit earlier on, but are there any particular challenges that you find having Read and Write in the school or being used inside the school?
I think upon first receiving the training requires time, and it requires commitment, and it's like everything, if you don't use it, you lose it. So you have to become very familiar with it yourself. The first time I received it was 2013, and I tried to roll it out on my own, and I tried to take autonomy on that, and I would wholly recommend that you put a team in on this, not just one person, because you need your LSAs to be reinforcing it, you need your teachers to be reinforcing it. So LSA training and teacher training, and anybody that works in school will know that that is valuable time that you don't get with the adults. So making sure that you roll that out within the adult community first, putting in a program to train parents. I think one of the things I've learned about the online training is actually I could be creating videos to help parents with it at home, because again, I don't have that face-to-face time with the parents. So distance learning has actually shown me ways that I can improve the rollout across the community. And then when you then start talking about training the children, you can't sit down with them for 4 hours. I never have 4 hours with a child or 5 hours with a child.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have half an hour here and half an hour there. So you've got to develop a program so that one skill can be delivered over a period of time. So that's a rollout of a program, which again takes time and energy. So if you can have, the more people you can have on that program, the more children you can affect. So I definitely learned a lot from the rollout the first time, to the rollout the second time, to the rollout the third time. And there are a lot of challenges. It takes a lot of time, but I do believe the outcomes, for me, even if I hit one child, not hit, obviously, clearly, if I can support one child with this particular piece of software, then I've done my job for that child. It might be that I need to do something else for another child, but hopefully the success rate is higher. Generally, the success rate is higher, but even if you can just affect one child's life, actually, job done.
Well, I think, Louise, it's gratifying to hear that in terms of everybody thinks, I suppose, education technology, whether it's inclusive technology or general technology, it's a quick fix. We'll put it in and it'll work and everybody will know how to use it. And of course, you hear all these phrases about the children being digital natives, and I absolutely detest that phrase. And it's clearly not true, because we do need to take the time that you've talked about. One of the things that TextHelp we have had to learn, I guess, particularly within this remote learning period, is actually a couple of things that you really hit on the head there, which is the importance of involving parents. And that's not just about this remote learning time. It's about helping parents understand what help and support a child gets in school. It's also about giving teachers the flexibility of CPD on a time and a method and a way that's accessible in the widest range of the term to them. And also giving students the ability to access material that can frankly help them out in a much easier fashion that can be a little bit more self-paced. And that's one thing we've tried to put some effort into, is providing as many support tools as possible to help in those three areas, and try and make Read and Write a little bit faster to integrate. But we all know that change in practice and that change in support takes time. Anybody who's expecting miracles overnight is not going to get it. We all know that when we come to EdTech. But it's off to a good start. Looking forward, I suppose at this stage, Louise, what do you think the new academic year has in store? Are we going to be in Demerara College? Or are we going to be in blended learning, remote learning, reduced classes? What do you think that looks like?
Are you asking me to predict education in the future?
we're all having a go.
Crystal ball.
I think that we are all very, very much missing the children, and I think that the children are very much missing the community. So I do think we'll be returning to school. I think one of the things that I've noticed with some of my children with barriers is that the ones that need to come back to school, but the ones that are succeeding away from school, actually a blended platform isn't going to be a challenge. I have children who are absolutely flying. The children who are more introvert, the children who have anxiety, the children who don't like answering questions in class, the children who don't like being on the spot, the children who are being now given time to process their learning, actually they're flying. So why would we take that possibility away from them? And then the technology becomes even more important as a way of communicating and keeping in touch with each other.
Yeah, a lot of that's very similar to a lot of the other conversations we've been having with educators around the world. I think we're preparing for a different. I'm trying not to use the phrase "a new normal" because there's two phrases I'm not liking right now. Normal, the other one is unprecedented. Those are two I'm trying to avoid in all of our TextHelp live chats. But I think that's true, and part of the challenge now, I think for all of us, is to come up with a tight plan of what ed tech has worked, what technology is needed to support learning. And I just threw a couple of comments just on the screen there. And in terms of the three things I suppose we're looking at that tie directly into the conversation we had today, number one, how do we ensure that wherever learning is happening, that we make sure it's accessible? And that's not just with Read&Write and those individual supports, but it's also making sure that the content itself is accessible. How do we deliver inclusion inside and outside the classroom and do that all within that remote learning thing? So listen, we're nearly just at the end of our time here today, Louise. I don't know if you have any other comments that you wish to add. Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of going forward? Is there a recommendation you would give to schools about technology? And I suppose specifically, I have an agenda with Read&Write. Do you think it's a valuable addition to that toolkit going forward for home?
I think that within Dubai, we're at the beginning of an increase in numbers of children that are going to need access support for exams. So I think in terms of if you're thinking about budgetary support for children, the financial aspect, it is cheaper to have a piece of software in place than it is to have human readers and human scribes. So I think that there is a financial gain to investing in something like this. I think it needs to be seen as a long-term rollout. Start with year 7s and roll it up through the years and just keep that going. Don't expect it to be fixed in a term. But in terms of the children, I think they can still access this when they leave school. They can buy a personal account. They can use it going into university. They can use it going into employment. When I very, very first started using this, 2000, my brother has dyslexia. He was 48 at the time. But I asked him to trial it out, and actually it worked for him within the, I know that's probably outside the licensing agreement, but it helped him within the workforce. So there's ways that we can continue to support people, not just children, for life. So do I like it and agree with it? Yes, otherwise I wouldn't invest in it.
I think that's what you call a ringing endorsement, Louise. I like that. Yeah,
we do have small budgets. We have to be really careful about where we put our finances, and we don't have unlimited amounts of money to spend. I think this one is the one for me and for the students that I've worked with presently in secondary and sixth form has definitely been the most useful.
Yeah, and I think we're certainly cognizant of the fact that there's a potential for enrollment numbers to go down in schools in the region next year. The budgets are going to be contracted, and within that, we just wanted to highlight exactly what you've said. It's important to pick and very carefully pick the tools that have the maximum level of impact. And on that, Jamie, we are doing something for the duration of the rest of the academic year and for the time of school closures. What are we doing to help schools?
Yeah, so TextHelp are want to help as many students and schools as possible in the region. So we are making our tools available for free to any schools or students, as I said, in the region. So that includes Read&Write. It also includes Equatio, which is our math or MAS software, Fluency Tutor, and WriteQ. So if you would like to avail of that offer, please let me know, and you can always reach out to me on either my Twitter handle or the email address here at the bottom of the screen at edtech@texthelp.com. I would be more than happy to set the school up.
Thanks, Jamie. And that's a good positive note to leave today on, giving away something for free. But I would hasten to add that for us, it's not just about giving away something. It's about ensuring that all schools and all educators, teachers and parents have the support that they need to really make a positive impact with this as we go forward. So all that remains for me to do is thank our friends at BSME for publishing this TextHelp Live talk today. And the biggest thanks, of course, has to go to the amazing and the ever wonderful Louise Dawson, Head of Inclusion at the Mirror College. Louise, it's always a pleasure. And we really want to thank you for your time that you've invested today. I know you're incredibly busy. And I do hope that Jamie and I will be back in the Middle East very, very soon. It's been March since we've been there. We're missing people and also a little bit of the sunshine, it has to be said as well. But listen, Louise, thank you and all the very
welcome.
The academic year and the summer.
Thanks, Louise.
You're very welcome. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.